The winter snows had melted. The hedges around me had once again gone green. And on one particularly nice day, Ember Spark decided that it would be a good time to show me her new daughter. "This is Evening Breeze," she said. The filly in question was a light purple unicorn with a red mane, though hers was not nearly as vibrant as her mother's. Instead, it was a dull, listless red, completely unflattering, and therefore probably appropriate. I'm sure she smells like poo. That visit was just odd. The filly burped and stumbled around my little enclosure like a brain-damaged kitten. And believe me, if I could have looked away during nursing time, I would have. Even more so during diaper-changing time. Please stop torturing me. Nobody cares about your ugly baby. And yet, Ember proved to be too much of a dullard to pick up on my silent entreaties, and our book that day, read more to the foal than to me, revolved around the attempts of a small rabbit to carry a large carrot back to his burrow for his mommy and daddy rabbit. He ended up having to enlist several other small animals to help him with the enormous root vegetable. There were pictures and everything. Children are boring. One thing, though, I finally got some appreciation for how my face was frozen, because when little Evening Breeze finally focused her dull violet eyes upon me, she let out an unholy squawk of fear and began shrieking at the top of her lungs. No matter what she did, Ember was unable to calm her daughter, so she finally loaded her up into the carriage and took off. Oh, she didn't even say goodbye to me. Another thing happened then. Silence and inactivity only seem boring when that's all you have. When you spend time with little baby ponies, it instead becomes a welcome relief. Good riddance, I thought, after Ember's quickly fleeing and, thanks to the baby, now much wider backside. Please stay away forever. Of course, I had no such luck. The years spun by, and things kept on pretty much the same as always. It took Evening Breeze several years before she was comfortable in my enclosure, and could look at my incredibly handsome face without flinching or hiding behind her mother. Then one day, she simply came up and stared at me, while her mother was trimming the hedges in my enclosure. "I'm not afraid of you," the filly said. "That's because you're too stupid to know any better," I would have liked to inform her. I saw less and less of Evening Breeze after a while, though she'd still occasionally come out and help out her mother. Apparently she was in school or something. Not that I minded. On the occasions that her mother managed to drag her out here, she usually spent the whole time sulking. "She takes after her father," Ember told me one day. "He hates being forced into things he doesn't want to do." My rage could have shattered mountains. Forced into things? How about being stuck as a living statue? Try that on for size. Had I access to even a fraction of my power, I would have likely done something horrible to both of them right then. Turn them into slugs, for example. Or, oh yes, turn Ember into a bird and Breeze into a worm, and let them work out their differences that way. Ah, what torture this is. My mouth is frozen, and I must giggle. The first thing I wondered was, why is she wearing black? The second thing I wondered was, why should I care? "My husband passed away last week," Ember Spark told me eventually, smiling sadly. Oh, lovely. Now I get to deal with a mare in mourning. There was a marked difference in the routine after that. Over the last couple of decades, Ember had chattered aimlessly about her life and she did her job. But now she was just going through the motions. She barely talked, and she would only wipe down my statue once every 3 days or so. No further sitting in the grass and reading. no singing, no happy talk. Not that I missed any of that, naturally, but she was kind of being a downer. If you aren't going to do it properly, just leave, I thought at her viciously. I can't do this anymore, she said a few days after that. Fine, leave me then. Oh, but fate had a much worse, fate in store for me than just that. Because a few days later, an adult and obviously unhappy Evening Breeze came by with her mother, whose mane was now turning as gray as it always should have been. Ember told me that her daughter would be taking over the family business of being a keeper of discord. Oh, goody. I can hardly wait. I almost missed Ember Spark. That's how dull and annoying Evening Breeze was. She never read to me, she barely cleaned me, and she never, and I mean never, did anything about the weeds and plants in my enclosure until they got to the point where she had to struggle just to get in. Then she'd rope some poor slob of a gardener into cutting the grass, or rather the weeds, down to a manageable level. Like Ember, Evening Breeze was also a mother. By the time she'd started working as a keeper, she'd already had 2 foals. The one nice thing I can say about this nag was that, unlike her mother, she at least didn't torture me with her foul brood's presence. Well, until one day, that is. See, I'd recognized the signs of a mare getting fat, and I gave it a 50-50 chance that she was pregnant or she was just really constipated. Then she pulled a vanishing act like her mother did, and came back a couple weeks later. No new foal for me to meet, though, which was nice. Still, I almost missed Ember Spark's attentions. She, at least, would keep the enclosure clean and maintained, though I had a certain fondness for the chaos that reigned now amongst the plant life. Evening never did anything but the bare minimum, and then she left. Sometimes she wouldn't show up for days. Oddly, I felt neglected and confused. And now that I think of it, perturbed. Oh, Sunny, no! Evening Breeze whined at her daughter, apparently named Sunny Meadows, who was currently engaged in climbing up my draconic back leg. I'll murder that foal-sitter, the mare muttered darkly as she snatched her infant away from me. The filly in question was a pale green Pegasus, with the wings probably due to her grandfather's genetics, and sporting a vibrant red mane that reminded me of Ember's, except that it was much more alive. It was almost like a fire or a sunrise. It's as if all the color and life that should have gone into Evening Breeze's mane went to her daughter's instead. The filly giggled excitedly as her mother plucked her off of me and deposited her firmly on the ground. I eyed the foal warily, and she eyed me back, sucking idly on a hoof as she did. Then, her little wings buzzing, she lifted unsteadily off the ground and came straight up to my frozen face. She looked at me with curiosity. I regarded her stonily. I was expecting the same reaction her mother had given when she first had a good look at my face, namely shrieking, fear and crying. Instead, Sunny Meadows burst out laughing. Then she reached out and tapped me lightly on the nose with her soggy hoof. Seriously, this filly just booped the nose of chaos incarnate. Funny face, the filly squealed joyfully. It's fair to say that I liked her already. No, Sunny, get away from there. The filly, dragged by a telekinetic field away from me, looked at her mother's face. And then she started wailing. Ha! How do you like it, you sourpuss? Heaving an exasperated sigh and glaring at me as if this were somehow my fault, Breeze took her daughter away. The filly looked back at me tearfully, reaching out with both hooves, obviously unhappy to be going. For the first time in my life, it felt like I had an ally. Just my luck that it had to be one that pooped herself on a regular basis. How come you don't read stories? Sunny Meadows, who was just barely out of diapers at this point, asked her mother as she went bouncing excitedly around the enclosure. Gran says you're supposed to read stories. He's a statue. I'm not reading stories to statues. It's stupid, said the moron. Sunny frowned and stopped bouncing. I think you should read him stories, Mama. Oh, goodness, no, I thought frantically. I appreciate the thought, kid, but I appreciate this silence more. If you want to read him stories, go ahead, Bree said with strained patience. I just want to finish this up and go. Sunny just looked at her mother for a while, then looked up at me. She winked, and then whispered to me, I'll bring a book tomorrow, Mr. Discord. What a sweet child. When I get free, maybe I'll do her a favor and just leave her alone. You want to take over? Fine then. This is a stupid job anyway. Sunny flinched as the bucket was hurled towards her, even though it landed nowhere near her. Fine, maybe I will, Sunny yelled back as her mother marched out of the enclosure. And I'll do a better job than you ever did. You do that. Maybe you'll learn how stupid this all is. But you'd better not let it affect your grades. I won't, Sunny said, stomping a hoof. I watched Breeze walk stiffly away. I felt something odd, unusual. Not quite anger. I'd felt that before, but it felt similar. I couldn't put a name to it, but something about the way she'd thrown that bucket had stirred something in this old stone heart of mine. And now I had yet another new keeper. There we go, Mr. Funnyface, Sunny said on the first day of her second week. I had to admit, things looked better. The grass was cut, though there were bald patches where weeds had been pulled. The hedges were neatly trimmed. And me? Well, I practically gleamed. I was so clean. And now it's story time. And just like that, my mood plummeted. Oh, come on, kid. I thought a lot about what stories you might like, and I figured you'd probably like funny stories. You know, being the spirit of chaos and all that. So I asked the librarian for a funny storybook that had lots of chaos in it. I hope you like it. I appreciate the thought, kid, but the Clockwork Knight went sprung, Sunny recited. And she started reading. No saddle rippers from this little filly, oh no. Instead, this was the first in a series of short stories, each one more nonsensical than the last. And, if I'd had possession of my vocal abilities, I might have even chuckled once or twice. This may not be so bad. Ready? Okay. 1, 2, 3, go! Tag, you're it! Giggling, Sunny Meadows ran off, hiding behind one of the nearby hedges. After a minute, she popped her fiery red head up, frowning at me. You're never going to win at this rate, Mr. Discord, she scolded, then burst out giggling. That's 27-0 for me. I would have rolled my eyes, but, you know, statue and all. Statue tag was only one of the things Sunny did when she was here, and she was here more often than not during the day, now that school was out. During the school year, sometimes she'd bring her homework and, apologizing to me, work on it right there in the clearing. It was a price I was willing to pay, since the alternative was that her mother would come back and take over again.